Who are some guys in fantasy that you're really high on or you're really low on?
I like Garrett Wilson a lot with Aaron Rodgers this year.
You would take him over A.J. Brown and Devontae?
I'll take A.J. Brown, Garrett Wilson, Devontae Adams.
Welcome back to another episode of Caps Off by the Game Day. A little special episode right now. A little preview of what will be happening in season. Felipe, tell them what we'll be doing in season.
What are we going to be doing in season?
I don't know. It's a good question. What are we
gonna do? Fantasy.
Yeah, it's fantasy football.
I was actually expecting the little intro to be like, welcome to Caps Off Fantasy. And you didn't say it, so I was like,
You know, this is just the first crack at it. So
fantasy is back.
Fantasy is football is back.
Fantasy football is back because there's been a lot of other fantasy shit going on. But fantasy football is back. Football is back. And we get to do mock drafts. I know you love mock drafts. Fantasy never ended for you because you've been doing 100 mock drafts a day since February. March. I was a little bit early.
I gave myself a little, 2 weeks.
2 weeks. 2 weeks off from the Super Bowl. Relax.
Yeah.
And then the mock draft starts March 1st.
Yep. But yeah, in season, Felipe and myself will be doing 2 fantasy episodes per week on top of the 3 that we already record on Caps Off. So Monday, Wednesday, Friday will be the normal Caps Off release dates. Tuesday and Thursday will be your fantasy episodes. So if you're into fantasy football, make sure to check that out. It's only going to be 20-minute episodes. They're going to be super short, super concise. We'll be reacting to stuff that happens on Sunday and Monday. And then on Thursday, we'll kind of be looking ahead and doing some buy low, sell highs. We'll have fun with it.
Hell yeah.
But this past week, we actually had the privilege, for some reason, I don't know why you and I were invited to do it, but we did a mock draft with a ton of industry experts, guys that write for Fantasy Pros, guys that are from footballers and everything. Fantasy footballers, I think it is actually.
Yeah, legitimate experts.
Legit people that do this for a living.
And they called us experts also, though.
Which was weird.
And they're still calling me an expert because I'm going out to the yes. But also, I'm going to the Fantasy Football Expo.
Yes.
And the marketing graphic that was put out there.
You were front and center.
I was front and center in between Scott Engel, the King.
The King.
One of the best fantasy guys out there. And who was the other guy? Frank, maybe?
Frank, yeah.
Frank, another fantasy expert. And they called me an expert. And they said our 3 experts are going out to the expo. And so now I'm an expert.
You're an expert.
So now I tell you what to do.
Yep, that's pretty much so. Yeah. So obviously, if you're listening, I would definitely go to the YouTube page or go to our TikTok or Instagram to kind of check out the graphic of this mock draft. But right now, we're going to go through the mock draft, kind of discuss the teams, kind of see who, how it went and what our favorite teams were. And just kind of talk about it a little bit like that. And then we're going to go into the top 50 players in fantasy and kind of just go through the board on Fantasy Pros and PPR and kind of just talk through people that were a little bit higher on, people a little bit lower on, and kind of just give our thoughts on fantasy. I think it'll be a good high-level approach to people we're really looking at in fantasy. But yeah, let's react to this mock draft, Felipe.
Let's do it, bro.
All right, so first and foremost, I had the 8th pick. You were right behind me with the 9th pick.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure I cleaned up after you fucked up.
Yeah, no, you definitely had a good draft. As a reminder, these were with all industry experts, so people that are way smarter than us.
To say the least.
I hated my team. I'll be very clear.
I hated your team too.
I hated it. Now, when I got to the 8th pick, or I had the 9th pick, excuse me, you had the 10th. When I got to the 9th pick, I was fine with Diggs. I was going to take Bijan and try and switch it up. I was fine with Diggs because I was expecting another wide receiver to fall. To which you sniped A.J. Brown right before me.
Yeah. Though I was not expecting A.J. Brown to fall to that point. I know that's probably the range where he's going, but the fact that Pollard got taken over him, even Garrett Wilson.
Even Amon-Ra.
Even Amon-Ra was actually a big surprise in the first round at the end of the first for me. Yeah. So I wasn't expecting A.J. Brown to fall to me. And so the fact that I was able to take CD, which was about right, I could see that coming. I was kind of eyeing that down. So I took that, which was natural. But when A.J. Brown fell to me in the second, it was like a fucking lock. I had to take that.
That was easy. I was targeting A.J. You ended up taking Patrick Mahomes in the 3rd, and he was the 3rd quarterback actually off the board. Yeah. Why did you go Patrick Mahomes? Why'd you go quarterback that early? Talk me through that.
So I'm going to tell you why. We're surrounded by a bunch of experts, and I don't know what the fufuck I'm doing. Josh Allen.
Well, you're the expert.
Right. So Josh Allen went 2 picks after, right? So here's what I was looking at. You get to the point in the draft where you're just not confident in anybody anymore, and I'm usually a wait for your quarterback guy. I draft a quarterback later, even round 10, even in the old days. I'll take Drew Brees in round 12, 13, whatever. I never cared, Phillip Rivers, but I just didn't love what I was looking at out of receivers, running backs. It was too early to take a tight end. And I knew we were in the range. The ADP was Patrick Mahomes at that point. He was right around there. So I said, fuck it. I'm going to pull it. I rarely get that QB1, but I'm going to take it this time.
Well, what you did with your team, and I think people kind of at least people in redraft, not even experts in fantasy, is like the way the board's falling, you could kind of give yourself some safer floors. And I think that's what you did kind of with Patrick Mahomes, knowing that Aaron Jones, actually he was taken right after you, but knowing that there were running backs that weren't available and you could wait. Patrick Mahomes, A.J. Brown, CeeDee Lamb kind of give you a really safe floor to play with and allows for you to have some room to improve. So I like that you did that. Yeah. For me, my first 3 starts of Diggs, Jonathan Taylor, Ramondre, I'm not that high on Jonathan Taylor, but I do when I look at, because you took A.J. Brown, the next availables were Devontae Adams, Nick Chubb, Derrick Henry. Now, Nick Chubb and Derrick Henry, a lot safer running backs than Jonathan Taylor, and obviously the holdout is an issue. But when it comes to Jonathan Taylor, we know when he is healthy what he can do with the ball. So for me, Jonathan Taylor, picking him there was like, all right, well, if he's going to fall really to the 2-4, I'm not crazy about it, but I will take it. And then obviously Ramondre, I didn't expect to fall to the 3rd round. Now I know the Patriots are looking at Dalvin, but Ramondre was one of the best running backs in fantasy last year.
You think he's like a 2nd round solidified type of guy?
I think I've seen Ramondre going kind of late 2nd or mid to late 2nd. So I mean, if Ramondre is going to fall to the 3rd, you're obviously going to.
Well, I'm not going to lie, you fucking sniped the shit. That's the other reason I took Patrick Mahomes. I was going to get Ramondre. I took 2 receivers at the 1st and the 2nd, and I wanted a running back there. Like I said, I'm not used to taking quarterbacks, but you took Ramondre, and so I was kind of forced with that. But I think Ramondre is a great pick. We know what he did last year in that Patriots offense, and we know he's going to get the volume again this year. They didn't bring in another running back. I think they brought like another running back, but it's not like he's going to be like threatening his role. So, yeah.
All right, well, let's look through like who has your favorite team right now? Because as I look through it, there's not really like someone that I'm sitting here being like, holy shit, I love it.
Right.
I'm not crazy.
I like Frank's, though.
I was going to say I like Frank's as well.
I like Frank's.
I don't agree with the Jamar over Jettis. Only because I think Jettis is a little bit safer than Jamar, given Joe Burrow's injury. And we know what Jettis, like as the 1-1, I feel like Jettis was the 1-1 in a few drafts last year and came back to be the wide receiver 1. Yeah. So I think Jamar can very well be the overall wide receiver 1. But I like what Frank did in terms of he gave himself a really, really safe floor by Jalen Hurts, Jalen Waddle, and Jamar Chase. And he still was able to get Kenneth Walker, who, although I think a lot of people are afraid of Zach Charbonnet, we know that in all of Pete Carroll's career as the head coach, like running backs still got a ton of volume. Under Pete Carroll.
Everybody gets touches.
And I'm not as opposed to, and I specifically think in this year, like when I look at my running backs, I'm very much interested in guys that are at least going to get inside the 5. And I think I could see that happening with Kenneth Walker a lot more and being utilized in the pass game. Now, Zach Charbonnet might take
I'm scared of those goal line carries.
But I'm still like, opportunity-wise, if I'm just looking at opportunistic, if I'm being opportunistic in this draft, I think Frank had a really good draft. I like Jamar and Waddle. That's going to be.
And look, Hurts is going to ball out. Because you know you're right, you said safe floor, but he's going to run. You got a quarterback that can run like that. That's a safe floor for your quarterback. The first 2 picks are good. And I like how he rounded out his team. I mean, it took a while to take a running back, but so his running backs are Walker and Rachaad White. Like, his running back game is weak. I don't agree, though. You don't agree? You think Rachaad White's going to be okay? I know he's going to get a lot of, receptions.
We'll talk about it, obviously, as we go through, but I think Rachaad White's the type of guy that didn't add anyone. Leonard Fournette isn't there. That team, Baker Mayfield could be checking it down a lot. Like, this is a guy that could just be having a lot of passing volume. And I think with fantasy, like, you could really get away with just having RB2s as your running backs if you have a loaded, wide receiver core. That's why I also look at this guy, Jordan, who had the 3rd pick, who started his draft with Tyreek, Olave, Jahmyr Gibbs, and then DJ Moore. That's a pretty safe trio for me. I love that. I love that as well.
But I love Jahmyr Gibbs as your first RB.
Yes.
Like, I think that's totally, like, he's going to be good. And he has a chance to be a top 12 running back. And I guess, yeah, man, I'm not going to lie. I'm looking through this draft.
I'm not crazy. And I'm not crazy about all these teams. And the reason I say that is because all these guys are experts, right? All these guys know what they're talking about. There's a reason they're picking a lot of these guys ahead of their ADP and sniping other guys. So I think for the most part, there's a reason all these teams aren't that stacked, right? There's not one clear cut because everyone knows what they're doing.
Nah, I'm the clear cut.
Well, you got Simi Fehoko, so.
Yeah.
But if you do want to go see the full mock draft, if you do want to go see what these experts said about why they picked certain guys at their ADP, why they reached on some guys, and why they let some other guys fall, make sure to go to thegameday.com. We will link the article in our bio, so make sure to go check that out and go check out that sleeper mock we did with all the industry experts.
Damn straight.
But now let's move into something that I think will be a lot more fun for us, something that we could talk about a lot more, which is going through the consensus rankings on Fantasy Pros, the top 50 players or so. Let's go maybe even the top 60, or just going through the list of fantasy players and kind of talking through guys we might be higher on, guys we might be lower on, and just really talk through fantasy. I think a lot of people, and I've gotten a lot of texts as of late of, I haven't looked at any fantasy. I haven't done any mock drafts. Like, I feel so lost. I don't know what to do. And I think this little episode that we're doing can serve as just kind of people that we're targeting and throughout all the things that you and I have seen. So who are some guys in fantasy that you're really high on or you're really low on? Let's start with kind of those first 10 to 15 guys. Who are some guys that you're really in on?
So really looking at like tier 1, tier 2,
tier 1,
tier
1, tier 2, and tier 3. Who are some fantasy guys you're really into?
I'll tell you a few guys I don't think you can miss on. You're not going to miss on, obviously, Jefferson, Chase, Hill. I'm scared of McCaffrey. I've always been scared of McCaffrey because of injury.
I'm scared of McCaffrey as well. But talk through that, because I think that's a...
McCaffrey, in particular? Have we seen him play 16, I guess now 17 games ever? Like,
I think he did last year, though. He was fully healthy.
Was he fully healthy last year?
Fully healthy.
The midseason trade kind of threw me off a bit. Yeah. And he played really well. But you always say this, is talking about like drafting a guy at his ceiling. And Christian McCaffrey, you're drafting him at his ceiling. And his ceiling is 25 points per game, of course. But if he gets hurt and doesn't reach that, then I'm a little scared. And I almost feel like I can bank on a receiver more, one of those top receiver more, getting those points rather than a Christian McCaffrey. And then aside from McCaffrey, this is a year where I don't think there's another running back where I'm really confident in super high there. So for me, Jettas, Chase, Tyreek I love at the top. And then when you get like towards that bottom round of the first, which is kind of like tier 2 guys, I love CD. But then that's when I'm happy taking a Bijan Robinson or even a Stephon Diggs too.
Yeah. Keep in mind, this is like PPR we're going through. Yeah. So half PPR would be a little bit different with like a CMC or an Eckler or even Saquon. When I look at the kind of first 3 tiers, let's say, of players in fantasy, yes, I agree, Jettis, Chase, CMC, Tyreek, Cooper Kupp. That's like the clear 5. The biggest worry I have is Christian McCaffrey, and I think you and I are pretty like clear on that. Yeah. And it's not only because of the injury history, and we know what he's capable of, but there's so many mouths to feed in San Francisco, and that's like...
Yeah, but he ate anyways last year. Like, he still got his.
Yes, but I'd rather almost draft Elijah Mitchell so many rounds later, knowing that if CMC goes down, Elijah's going to give me 60% of what he could do. I thought you were
say you drafted Elijah Mitchell at first. I was like, no, let me take CMC.
Because it's almost like the replacement, right? And I think I've always...
Yeah, you're right.
Here's the fantasy moat theory that I've always given, right? Moat. So, like, think of a moat, right? A body of water around a castle. Right?
I didn't know that was a moat, but now I know.
Yeah, so you know what you got the picture in your head, though, of what a moat is? So the moat theory is basically goes like this. You have a player, let's say, like Christian McCaffrey, and a guy, the moat... Depending on, like, if Christian McCaffrey is the castle, like, the moat around him isn't as big, right? It's not as protected because Elijah Mitchell could come in theoretically and produce not the same, but give you very similar value.
Yeah.
The counter to that almost would be, right, a Saquon Barkley. Now, I don't know who the fuck is behind Saquon Barkley. But if I'm drafting Saquon, he's got a really large moat because someone else isn't going to come in and take those, that share away and do it at the same value. Dalvin Cook was a guy last year where Alexander Madison can come in, give you very, very similar production, and therefore you should be a little bit worried or wary about drafting Dalvin Cook at where he was going, wherever he was going. So for me, the moat is really about, like, can someone come in and reproduce what that other person's doing? And I don't think, when I look at the running backs in the first round, there's not many that can do that.
But let me ask you a question. Why does that matter? Like, Saquon, like, why would that make you draft a Saquon Barkley instead of another guy because he has a higher moat?
Well, because
if either of them get hurt, you lose your guy regardless.
Correct. And I think that it's
why does that matter?
It's a fine line because it's not necessarily that's the number one indicator. It shouldn't be the number one indicator. It's more so like if I'm drafting someone, can I get very similar value out of a person behind him? I want to know, like, what's the value in terms of the team?
I see.
Like, how is the team going to value what they're going to do? So when I look at these guys, where I was going with this is out of any of the running backs that could go in the first round, the number one running back that I would want is Bijan Robinson.
I agree.
And the reason I would want Bijan Robinson and I have a stat and I was liking some tweets about it.
Oh, yeah. I love the tweets.
Is that every running back drafted in the top 12 in the NFL finished as the RB11 or better in their rookie year. Even Trent Richardson was the RB7 as a rookie.
Damn.
The point is that investing that type of draft capital in a running back tells us how the team wants to utilize them.
Yep.
So guys like Jahmyr Gibbs, guys like Bijan Robinson, when I look at running backs, think about Saquon in his rookie year, right? He was so overly utilized and performed. Zeke.
Yeah.
So if there's a running back that I want, it's Bijan Robinson, and it's because Tyler Algier also put up 1,000 yards behind that. Bijan Robinson's going to be utilized a lot more in the passing game. So if you're at the back half of the draft in the first round in a 12-team league, like Bijan is probably the number one guy that I want as a running back. So if you're early, you're going wide receiver. If you're later and you want a running back, Bijan's that guy you want. So I'm a lot higher on Bijan.
So, but if Bijan is gone, let's say, and you're at that back half, or you're at that, the last 4 picks of the first round, then what are you looking at?
Yeah, so for me, I'm personally I'm going to go, like, Diggs and CeeDee Lamb would be the people that I would really want. I think Amon-Ra is a guy that I would hope falls onto that turn in the second round because I think that'd be a really good stack. I'm a little worried about Saquon, and I think I liked the tweet, but it was another stat about essentially running backs that have gotten a certain share the year before. They usually fail to kind of reproduce in some capacity, and I think those 3 running backs that fell in that category was Saquon, Derrick Henry, and another guy. Saquon, I'm not opposed to. I know we were talking with Scott Engel last night at the game. He was very, very high on drafting Saquon. He drafted him in that sleeper mock draft as well because of the contract year. But again, we've always said, like, he's a home run threat. He's not going to run in between the tackles. And that offensive line isn't as good. I'd rather take Bijan. So I would rather have Stephon Diggs or CeeDee Lamb personally. I don't want Austin Eckler. I don't know what Kellen Moore is going to do with him.
Yeah.
I don't think Justin Herbert's going to be checking it down as much. I'm fine if you want to draft Kelce. I think he's probably the safest person in fantasy. The problem is at 34 years old, when is that fall off going to come?
Yeah, I'm scared of that.
But Amon-Ra is actually a guy, and I mentioned him, that I'm like super, super high on. And it's not because I had him and I had this stat. It's that I was
all the little stats.
I was pulling it out.
Fun little numericals.
Amon-Ra was tackled at the 1-yard line 3 times last year, which made Jamal Williams be the person that was the benefactor of those touchdowns. And he was tackled inside the 5 multiple other times. So if you kind of factor that in, he would have had a lot more touchdowns if he wasn't tackled, and that would have inflated that value. So I'm pretty high on Amon-Ra.
I mean, I like Amon-Ra. I think a lot of people like Amon-Ra because the Lions are going to score points. But now you add Jahmyr Gibbs, who's going to be taking a lot of touches from that offense as well. It's not that I'm low on Amon-Ra, but I think in that range where he's going, where you got like A.J. Brown, Devontae Adams, CeeDee Lamb, then I don't know. I'm looking at some of the other guys.
What about like tier 3? We got Garrett Wilson, Pollard.
Yeah. Well, Garrett Wilson, I'll probably take over Amon-Ra too. I like Garrett Wilson a lot with Aaron Rodgers this year. He was already really good last year in a fucking terrible offense, like the horrible quarterback play. And you're getting a guy that is 1 year removed from back-to-back MVP. So I love Garrett Wilson. That's probably the receiver for me that I'm looking within this like tier 3.
You would take him over A.J. Brown and Devontae? I think I would take him over.
I'll take A.J.
Brown.
I'll take A.J. Brown, Garrett Wilson.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then
I agree.
Devontae.
I'm probably taking Waddle over Devontae as well.
I might, dude. That situation in Las Vegas is scary.
It's really scary. Also, I think Devontae Adams' line is set at 96.5 receptions. He had 100 receptions last year, and that was with Derek Carr, who still force-fed him.
Yeah.
I think, if you're drafting him in the second round, I'm hoping that you're going to have more than 100 receptions. And I think Amon-Ra is a guy that can. Garrett Wilson's a guy that can. Yeah. I think A.J. Brown may not, but because of the yards and the touchdowns that could follow with A.J. Brown, it's a very high ceiling, high upside play. Nick Chubb's also another guy. Like, Nick Chubb is on an offense that he doesn't, like, Kareem Hunt's no longer there.
Gone, yeah.
If he can catch another 15 to 20 more balls, and realistically 80% of those balls are going to be caught, that's going to add to his value. He has overall RB1 he's the best pure runner in the NFL.
Yeah.
That offense is going to be a lot better. Deshaun Watson going to be a lot better. They have one of the best offensive lines. I think Nick Chubb's also a home run hit.
It's a good value pick at that point.
Yeah.
I feel like the past couple of years, you're looking at Chubb in the first round like always, but now you got getting them down there. What does that like equate to? Kind of mid-second, late second round? And so you love that. And again, like it depending on what you do in the first round, it's obviously going to alter what you do in the second round. But if you can get good value there with like a Chubb in the second round, and that means you probably got like a Tyreek Hill or somebody around in that range in the first, and I think you're in business.
Yeah, totally. I also look at guys like in that tier 4 range, which is you have your boy Devontae Smith, Chris Olave.
So high on him.
Talk me through Devontae Smith and why you're high on him.
So midway through the season last year in Philadelphia, he actually outplayed A.J. Brown in almost every metric that you care about for receivers. Like we talk about efficiency metrics, yards per catch, like all that type of shit. So he was huge, especially in the playoffs. That was evident who was out producing who. So Devontae Smith is huge. And you're going to get Jalen Hurts, year 2 of eliteness. I know this is his 3rd year, but 2nd year of being like really good. I think that's going to help him out. The offense is getting better. They added to their run game with DeAndre Swift. So I think Devontae Smith is going to have more opportunities, and he's only getting better. So I love Devontae Smith. I know a lot of people are super high on Chris Olave. I feel like you're going one or the other. Some people are more high on Olave than Smith, and some are the other way around. I don't know.
I think Chris Olave in that tier 4 is the only wide receiver that has the chance of being, definitely a wide receiver 1, but potentially an overall wide receiver 1. Think about what Derek Carr did with Devontae Adams, force-fed him. Chris Olave is a lot younger. Yeah. And obviously, they're not the same. Devontae Adams is an incredible wide receiver, but Olave was a guy that really produced and outproduced what his ADP was last year. And I think he's, this time next year, you're going to see him in that Garrett Wilson, Waddle type range, A.J. Brown type range. Could be. So I think Olave is actually a home run hit there. DK is also another guy. Now, there's a ton of mouths to feed, but DK from a talent perspective.
I don't love DK just because of what you said, the mouths to feed. Whereas, and don't get me wrong, he's still 8 last year. Like, him and Tyler Lockett were both, bottom wide receiver 1s, probably, high in wide receiver 2s last year. But what was we just talking about?
DK?
Oh, DK, yeah. In Seattle, it's just that now you add another receiver. He was first-round capital, and he's fucking good. Honestly,
might be
probably the most talented as a receiver than out of all 3. And then you add another running back, Charbonnet, and there's just so many mouths to feed.
Yeah,
I don't know. I'm not too confident.
Going into that tier 5, you got Amari Cooper. Amari Cooper and Calvin Ridley are 2 guys that you and I have always said that Amari Cooper is one of the most underrated wide receivers. I think he put up 1,200 yards last year, even with Jacoby Brissett for half the season. That offense is going to be vastly improved. I love Amari Cooper. I know people have said Amari Cooper's never finished higher than an RB or wide receiver 11 in fantasy.
That's true.
But I don't think he's ever been able to stay healthy for a full season when he was there. When he was in Dallas, he couldn't stay healthy.
Yeah,
but he was
that's
part
cooking. Of your concern as well now.
Yeah, but I'll take my chances. Again, we're drafting him as your wide receiver 2 potentially, or even wide receiver 3. Yeah. If Amari Cooper's your wide receiver 3, that's a home run hit. Calvin Ridley's another guy. I think Calvin Ridley is
I agree with Ridley.
A top 10 wide receiver. I think
in general or in fantasy?
In general.
Okay.
And
I think he's in that range where you kind of talk about him 8 to 12, 13 is probably somewhere in there.
And I think that people have forgotten what he's done. Trevor Lawrence, I think, attempted the 4th most end zone passes last year, and Calvin Ridley is going to be he's better than Christian Kirk, and we saw what Christian Kirk did. So that's another one. Aaron Jones is a huge one that I'm also high on. Aaron Jones has never finished outside of the top 10 running backs in fantasy over the last 4 years. And Aaron Jones is currently going as the RB16 off the board, RB15 on this.
What I've heard is that a lot of people are scared of A.J. Dillon starting to get more and more carries and kind of taking it away from him, taking just touches away from Jones. But I mean, at the end of the day, you can't dispute those stats that you just talked about, man. Yeah. You bring out the hitters. You know what I'm saying?
I just also when I look at it, if it's Aaron Jones or Breece Hall may have the higher ceiling because of the offense.
Easily.
But I'm worried about the injury, and they do have other mouths to feed there. I'm not saying that's as talented as Breece Hall, but Aaron Jones is just a guy that the proof is definitely in that pudding. Well, I wouldn't be opposed to if you're late in that first, which we keep talking about, where Breece might go in the 3rd.
Yeah,
I can take an Aaron Jones in that 3rd, or I can take Amari Cooper. Now I can have potentially 3 wide receivers, and Amari Cooper be my wide receiver 3, and then pull an Aaron Jones, and he could still finish as an RB1.
I looked through the pudding, and the proof was definitely there. But really, for real, when I'm looking at these running backs right here, because
I know where you're going.
We're looking at tier 5. Yeah, you probably do, and you have these different guys. Jahmyr Gibbs, to me, you spoke on top 12 running backs, right? Was that the specific stat? Top 12 running backs, or running backs that are taking the top 12, how they perform. Was that it?
Yeah.
All right, cool. Jahmyr Gibbs, obviously, got that capital. He's going to get his volume, and his volume is going to come largely through the air. It's PPR. We really value that, receptions. And I think he's just going to get his touches, his volume. And I think he's just fucking talented as shit.
He's
you mentioned even Trenton Richardson that counted for him, and he flamed out quick. This dude, Jahmyr Gibbs, is talented as shit. So probably I'm going to take him over guys like even Breece Hall.
I'm going to take him over Breece as well.
Yeah, or Aaron Jones. I would definitely take Jahmyr Gibbs over Aaron Jones.
Yes and no. I think there's a chance you can get both of them, which would be interesting.
That would be interesting. I'm just looking at them at back-to-back.
Yeah. Let's we could talk through, because we're going to wrap soon.
Yeah.
Maybe some quarterbacks. I know I have Christian Watson. There's been a lot of hype on, and there's a ton of stats to back up Christian Watson. And what he can do, and I'm all for it, and I think he could be a home run hit. The worry comes down to Jordan Love. And I think that's a fair, I think the industry is super high on Christian Watson. There's a lot of stats that back up why Christian Watson's going to have be a home run threat this year. But I'm still wary of it. I'm a little concerned because of Jordan Love. Now, Jordan Love looks great in training camp, but you never know.
Watson, he's got the tangibles. That's what we like to see. Big. His size is like 6'5", like 230, and runs a fucking 4.3 or some shit. Like, he's got that. But yeah, it's all dependent on Jordan Love, and we don't know what the fuck that is. So I'm like you said, I'm wary of him as well. But if he pans out, he pans out. But would you rather get somebody with the higher floor that's going around the same range? I tend to be the guy who does. I like to take my flyers a little bit later.
Yeah, same. I'd rather, like, in that instance, in Tier 6, I would rather take Deontay Johnson, who had 0 touchdowns last year. That's why he's going that late. He's always been one of the most underrated wide receivers. I'd rather and I'm not high, and you and I both talked about on taking quarterbacks there, but I wouldn't mind taking a Justin Herbert or a Justin Fields. Christian Kirk's also there. He's going to be benefit a lot from Calvin Ridley.
Yeah.
Kenneth Walker's also there, right? His stock is falling, and we talked about it. But I think he's a guy that can return massively on that ADP. Before we wrap, I want you to kind of go into like a quarterback or two. I know you and I talked about quarterbacks, but I think there's something to be said about drafting a quarterback early, given they provide you the most amount of points in fantasy. So is there a quarterback that you're looking at and being like, you know what, fuck it, I'll draft that person at all costs?
So I think it's like situational, as we talked about when we were talking about the sleeper draft. Like, I was in a position in the 3rd round where I didn't like the value. It's not that I didn't like the guys. I didn't like the value of any of the running backs and receivers. It was too early for a tight end. And so I took a Patrick Mahomes. But that's not usually what I would do. I think there's a lot of in the past, there's always been like 2 rushing quarterbacks, 3. Now there's like a lot of these guys who can provide you a safe floor. Bro, even Anthony Richardson, like, late. I'm not saying go out and just draft him. Maybe draft another guy's insurance if you're going to do that. But Anthony Richardson has top 10 value only because he's a good rusher.
Yeah.
He's gonna run the ball, and he's going to get volume. So I like Fields where he's at. I feel like he's in a position where there's guys that you don't really like love around him. If you're already kind of like loaded up on receiver, you probably feel better about taking him than like if you're like only left with at receiver, like you're left with guys like, I don't know, Brandon Ayuk, Christian Kirk. Maybe you feel better. Go take your quarterback. I like Fields. And then waiting a bit. I know I mentioned Anthony Richardson. I like getting him late. You might want to get like one of those guys that's going to be there as like a Kirk Cousins, like way later.
I'll be honest. Like, if I think Anthony Richardson, though, I'd rather even take the gamble on like a Russell Wilson if we're waiting that late.
Talent-wise. I get it, but I think like there's something about wanting the rushing upside nowadays. And the only way I wouldn't want the rushing upside is if I have like Joe Burrow. Like, I need one of those elite passers. And even still, I want Fields over Burrow. So, like if I'm in a position like later on, I want to get one of those guys that provides that rushing upside. So whoever that is, that's who I want.
I also think, and we'll go into our last point, Deshaun Watson and Tua are 2 guys that can provide you drastically different things, but are going super late. Deshaun is a guy that was one of the best fantasy quarterbacks. The team's going to be vastly improved. Tua is going to give you a safe floor week over week if he can stay healthy. So, if you want to wait on quarterbacks, there are some guys later in the draft that you can get a lot of value on. Right before we wrap, what's one player kind of lower down this board? And, you could even bring up JK because you've said it that
I've said it too many times.
You're looking at and you're like, that to me feels like a person I want to draft.
Yeah, I've said JK too many times, so I'm going to veer off of that, even though like that's obviously my guy. We talked a bit about him. Let's see who else. You know what? I'm gonna be a little different. Not different even in a bad way. I think I've heard some people talk about it, but I think Jerry Jeudy has a potential to have a big year this year. He progressed a lot throughout the back half of last season. Totally. And the thing with Jerry Jeudy is he's never reached his potential. Right. And so I feel like you're still kind of drafting him at a good value now, because if he pops off this year, he's going to be skyrocketing up.
Totally,
Dude's like 24 years old.
Can he stay healthy, though? I feel like he hasn't been able to stay healthy.
Yeah, I don't know how many games. I know he played throughout the back end of last year, and it was good. I feel like he's one of those guys that has like hamstring injuries, which are kind of annoying.
Yeah.
But look, Christian McCaffrey's going to early in the first round. We're not thinking about injuries. Jerry Jeudy, I feel like you could get good value of him. If we're expecting Sean Payton and Russ to get it together, Jerry Jeudy will be the main benefactor of that. You say it all the time. Cortland Sutton can't separate.
Yeah.
Jerry Jeudy can. It's just a matter of like putting everything together, and I think he started to do that at the back half of last year, and that should continue this year.
Yeah. A guy I'm looking at, I'll go running back just to veer. It's 2 guys. It's Alexander Mattison, because I think they didn't really add anyone. They drafted someone, but there's no one else there, and that's the RB1 on a pass-heavy team. Even if he doesn't pop off, he's still going to get touchdowns. He's still going to get game in the, or get passes in the screen game.
Yeah.
Alexander Mattison, he may not be like the sexiest, but he's a guy that can give you a pretty safe floor week over week. You know, people forget that when Dalvin would go down, Alexander Mattison was probably the greatest handcuff in the NFL behind Tony Pollard with Zeke. So Alexander Mattison going as the RB23 can improve and kind of finish as a in that middle RB2 pack. And then one last guy I'm looking at is Alvin Kamara. Now, Alvin Kamara is a guy that obviously wasn't great last year. His efficiency numbers have kept on falling, but a 3-game suspension is nothing. And I know you're really high on Kendra Miller, but Alvin Kamara is now with a quarterback that can move the chains a lot better than Andy Dalton. I think Dennis Allen as a head coach has to prove a lot more, else he's not going to have a job after this year. And from a talent perspective, it's almost like, I don't want to say he's Austin Eckler, but he might be the most talented pass catcher out of the backfield, or one of them. And Austin Eckler, we've always talked about the age, right? You fall off. Austin Eckler is past that age and popped off last year. Alvin Kamara is at that age, could very well do a very similar thing in just returning on value. So I'm looking at Alvin Kamara. I'm looking at Alexander Mattison as two guys really late that are convincing me that I will be okay drafting wide receivers heavy and relying on these running backs late.
I like them. I like them a lot.
Well, hey, guys, that was fun. That was good.
Yeah. Football's back.
If you're listening, if you're watching, we're going to be doing this, like I said, twice a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays. So if you want fantasy-specific advice, obviously we fuck around all the time on the actual podcast, and we very much will. But this will be a lot more analytical, a lot more conversational about fantasy-specific stuff. Obviously, we're going to try and make it a lot quicker. We got a lot to talk about, a massive season incoming. So if you want any fantasy advice, promos, or anything, make sure to go to thegameday.com. You can find it all.
That's right.
And yeah, we're going to be doing this all season, Felipe.
Let's go. Fantasy's back, baby. Football's back.
Football's back. If you're looking for any fantasy advice, make sure to hit that follow button. We're going to be talking fantasy every single week for the entire season. So, see you there.